I want to give a brief intro to this video. There's a powwow or gathering we had up at Moon Lake over August 7th and 8th. It was Friday and Saturday, and several individuals spoke. I was one of the speakers. They asked me to speak. I filled in for someone who couldn't show up. So Mark asked me if I would speak. Mark and Ken are the main people who do it, but they have a lot of other people who also help. If you want to see the full videos of this, you can go to Terry Carter's webpage. Sorry, not webpage. I don't even know if he has a webpage, but he does have a YouTube channel. It's Terry Carter, and he's a treasure hunter, but he also does other things. And one of the things he did on this is he recorded both nights. I'm not sure when they'll be up, but just go subscribe to his channel, and you'll be able to find those videos, the full-length videos of everyone who spoke. It was a great time, met a lot of cool people, and going to have some good times in the future. There's some individuals who want to go squatching with us, so it was nice to meet those individuals, and it was nice to collaborate and hang out afterwards. They usually have a powwow every year. I'm not sure if they're going to do public ones anymore, just because this one was a lot of out of the pocket for them. So we'll see how it goes. I'm hoping they do another one next year like this. It was really cool. Moon Lake was really cool. Like I said, lots of cool people. But anyway, this is my talk that I did on Bigfoot. The audio is not that great. I had a boom mic on my camera. I forgot to bring my Rhodes or whatever, my portable one. I can't even talk. Anyway, and it was windy, so bear with the video. It's a good video. Well, that was kind of there's people who want to see it, so I'm putting it out there. I wouldn't say it's a good video, but anyway, I did my best. I don't even know what I'm trying to say now. Anyway, enjoy the video, and you have a good one. Bye.
We're going to bring up our speakers, and John Salmon's going to be our first one, and he'll be talking about Bigfoot. After he's done, we'll give you a short break before we get another speaker, and give you all a chance to go over here and buy some barbecue and support all our vendors and everything. But let's, big round of applause. Let's bring John Salmon up.
Do
you need anything up there?
No, I'm old. I have paper. My name is John Salmon. I'm going to kind of give a little bit of brief background on myself and how I got onto the subject. Back in the early 80s, when I was 18 years old, we went on a trip up in the backcountry of Wyoming in the Snake River drainage. And this particular area, you have to drive 20 miles in, and it's a 6-mile hike back to this area. And what happened occurred actually even more remote than that. But anyway, what we ended up finding, we found over 100 footprints in a mudslide that was like rock clay that had just come down. I feel like I'm echoing, so I'll step back a little bit. And at the time of being 18 years old, you're dumb, you're a teenager, and you're looking at all this stuff. But how we discovered it is at the bottom of the mudslide, we discovered elk track, deer, moose, black bear, and half the group found it before I was showing it, but they went up this path and they had found all these tracks. But there was a large male and what we think was a female and an adolescent, but they wove through, and that's kind of what started the journey for me. But at that particular time in my life, I was terrified of the subject. I had never entertained the fact of Bigfoot up until that time, and I was terrified. I was a big game hunter. The mountains at night were never the same for me, and so I just was like, no, I don't like this subject. We told a couple people back then. All right.
Too tall for us.
That's all right. Yeah, there you go. All right. All right, thanks. So another thing too is like I said, I hunted mule deer, hunted mule deer for decades. But I also grew up in Yellowstone. My dad owned a motel in Yellowstone, so I was always out in the mountains. I did a lot of dumb things in Yellowstone Park as a teenager. So I was very familiar with the outdoors, and so it kind of altered the outdoors for me because I couldn't deny what I saw. My mom was an art teacher for over 20 years, so I was very familiar with detail and art, and I actually got down in the footprints and I could find the displacement of the toes on each print. But it was out, the thing that struck me was it was out in the middle of nowhere, and who would fake this? And once upon a time I was very athletic and I couldn't follow the large set, but the large set would meander and the other two would stay together and they'd kind of meet. But anyway, so fast forward, there's a lot of other weird things that occurred there that over the years we've talked about and kind of rewind and go, do you remember this? And anyway, so fast forward to the mid-90s, I'm up by Bald Mountain in the Uintas and I find a track line. And I didn't tell my family probably until about 3 or 4 years ago. And I thought, you gotta be kidding me, they're here too? And so that kind of altered the Uintas for me too. And then fast forward a little bit more, in the year 2007, the BFRO, Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization, had an expedition in Utah. And a friend of mine went on it, told me about it after the fact, and I thought, and I never looked up the topic because I wasn't interested in it. But he went on this and told me a lot of the stories that occurred there and some personal things that happened to him. And I thought, you gotta be kidding me, there's people who go out and look for these things? And so I go, I want to go. So what we did is we scheduled ourselves to go on a bunch of expeditions the following year in 2008. And so our first expedition was in California. We went to California, and we were kind of used as guinea pigs. But so we went there. A little bit later, some things occurred there. A little bit later, went to the Washington Olympic Peninsula expedition. Met an individual by the name of Christine Walls. If you follow the Bigfoot programs back in the mid 2008 to 10-ish, she was on TV a lot, and she happened to be an investigator for the BFRO. And we were just kind of talking to her happenstance, and at the time there was really no investigators for the state of Utah that were really doing much. And long story short, by the end of 2008, I was an investigator for the BFRO. And so we would start calling on individuals and doing things in Utah and interviewing and submitting things. And we also did Montana because Montana didn't have an investigator at the time. And then all of a sudden in the spring of 2009, I'm now an organizer for BFRO. So I'm starting to get together, I'm starting to schedule and help organize the 2009 Utah expedition. And a friend of mine, we wanted to be more adept. I mean, we were outdoorsmen, but I know now I wasn't much of a tracker, and I'm still not much of a tracker, but so we flew some trackers in. We flew two in from Georgia, and we flew one in from Washington. The two from Georgia are with a group called Enigma, and they trained they were spec ops, but they trained search and rescue down there. But the unique thing about them is they had an emphasis on tracking Bigfoot. So they showed us a lot of different things that Squatch did. They showed us track lines, they showed us deer kills, they showed us dog kills, and various things, and then they taught us how to track. And we actually, during our night session, believe it or not, it's easier to track at night than it is day because you can control your light source. But during our night session, we actually had activity up there, so that was really interesting. And then we had our 2009 expedition. I also helped organize the 2010, I organized the 2010 Utah expedition. And then since then, I also went on several, I went to the Wyoming, I went back to California several times, helped the California BFRO out there. And then now I've just been doing it mainly with family and friends. We started a group, just a local group, it's mostly family and friends, called the Utah Squatching group. If you want to see some of the stuff we do, we have an Instagram page, we have a Facebook page. So we did all that. And what I want to talk about, at least first, and I'll get into some personal stories, is there's some aspects that through the years of doing this, I don't hear talked about much at events like this. And it's historical references before the years of 1960, in the 60s, before the name Bigfoot was coined. My sons have done a couple papers on it for college, and they did some research, and I kind of pointed them in the direction, but they did a lot of research. In fact, one of them is from a French explorer, and my oldest son, his friend speaks French and actually had to translate the diary of this individual. And he says it was very difficult because the French was so old. So if you bear with me, I'm going to read a few stories and then I'll get into some personal experiences. But in 1540, a group of conquistadors traveling in what now is Texas, Kansas, Nebraska mentioned in their journals, they came to a province of exceedingly tall and strong men like giants. These people of Castaneda called them live in straw huts under the ground and were capable of carrying 300 to 400 weight on their head. The tribe ended up helping the Spaniards cross the river. During the crossing, the tribe tried to fight the explorers and ended up running away at the end. Another group of conquistadors mentioned something of the same nature. There was a race of giants from 10 to 11 palms high, which is around 7 feet. And the conquistadors were a completely different part of the country to those guys. Another one, Spanish settlement in the Florida province, Hernando de Salto, and forgive me of my pronunciation, was another noble conquistador that mentioned giants in his journal from his explorations in the Americas. His entire journal is full of references of the giant people that interacted with Native Americans. In 1603, there was a French explorer by the name of Samuel de Champlain. That was a fake on my part. But anyway, he stated that he had encountered a Gaogu while exploring the Americas near St. Lawrence River, that is near modern-day New York State, and they were a savage giant, described that they could eat men whole. The London Times had an article published in 1785 stating the following: there is lately arrived in France from America a wild man who was caught in the woods 200 miles back from the Lake of Woods by a party of Indians. They had seen him several times, but he was so swift of foot that they could by no means get up with him. He is nearly 7 feet tall, covered with hair, but has little appearance of understanding and is remarkably sullen and interactable. When he was taken, half a bear was found lying beside him, which he had just killed. Jose Marino Manzina was a botanist who accomplished Juan Francisco de la. Anyway, if you want to see the notes later, you can come and we have the bibliography on all this. Do a survey of the indigenous people in 1792. They voyaged up to British Columbia to conduct their research. He mentioned the following about his travels. One does not know what to say about Matlock, inhabitant of the mountainous country, of whom all have an unspeakable terror. They figure that it has a monstrous body, all covered with black animal hair, the head like a human, the arms very large, and the toes and fingers armed with long curved nails. His howl fell to the ground those who hear him. Lewis and Clark wrote on August 14th, 1805, Lewis specifically recorded getting directions from Native American chieftain and was warned to avoid a certain part of the mountains. Living there was a tribe of bear-like people who they called broken moccasins because their print looked like wore either broken moccasins or no shoes at all. This tribe of people were known to hide in the rocks and ambush people, eating their horses and killing men. Even getting close to the tribe ran the risk of broken moccasins sneaking into the travelers' camp, stealing their horses. When there were no travelers to rob, the tribe lived off roots in the rocky land. In 1865, ecologist George Gibbs was conducting a survey in the Washington Territory and wrote in his journal, the Tehisco are described as giant-sized, their feet 18 inches long and shaped like a bear. They wore no clothes, but the body is covered with hair like that of a dog, only not so thick. They are said to live in mountainous in holes in the ground and smell badly. They come down chiefly in the fishing season, at which time the Indians are excessively afraid of them. Their voices are like that of owls, and they possess the power of charming, so that those hearing them become demented or fall down to swoon. In 1912, the New York Times published an article that states there are 18 giant skeletons found in Madison, Wisconsin. They state that they were under assumption that they were men, but the skeletons were too large to be men-like. The skulls were very large and dominant ape-like features. So there's a lot. I just want to emphasize that there's a lot of information out there, especially if you go into the Smithsonian and their paperwork and you're willing to dig. It's hard to digitally search for it because it's just not named conveniently. And one thing this isn't Bigfoot related, but it's a really cool story, and it's something I came across, and it's partly because I read Louis L'Amour's book. I don't remember the name of the book, but he talked about woolly mammoths. And he said that they existed about 350 years ago. So I was like, okay, that's new to me. So I went and found, it took me a while to find it, but there's actually an entry, a report from the Bureau of Ethnology by James H. Howard reports that the Ponca tribes who live in the vicinity of the Acton, South Dakota, used to go on what they called the long hunt. On one of these trips, perhaps the last one, no earlier than 1600s, but more likely in the 1700s, they killed a mastodon near Ryobi, Nebraska. Their name for the animal was Pashnutat, which means long nose. They also killed something else which would live in holes underground and was described as a giant land sloth, which they called walking doggy. This animal was long-bodied, had forked feet, yellow hair, and about 8 feet tall and about 40 feet long. So there's a lot of information out there that you just don't hear normally. And so I'd encourage, if you're really interested in the topic, there's a lot of Smithsonian old paperwork and old documents you can go through. And now I'll jump into some personal stories. So on one of the expeditions in California that I was on, we went to California. At the time, I was an organizer, and the California BFRO team needed some help guiding some people out. So my friend and I, that were both, he's also an investigator too at the time, and an organizer, we were asked to guide some people out. And we had, prior to that, we had kind of researched and knew some of the areas potentially that they were going to potentially go. He was lucky enough that he went there, and I went somewhere else. Well, later on, I found out that his group had watched a subject for 55 minutes in a thermal until the people that he was guiding got nervous and they bailed. They no longer wanted to be there, so they left. So what we did the following day is, and we'd already been trained as trackers by this point in time, and what we did, so the following day, we were able to talk one guy into going up there. We took a thermal with us because thermals behave the same day or night, it doesn't matter. They sat where they were sitting that night, my friend and this other guy that was there, and I went down off the trail to go where the subject was at. And I don't know if you've ever been in the Redwoods, but there's a lot of areas that you can't bushwhack like you can here. Here in the Uintas and a lot of places, unless you get into really thick oak brush and terrain like that, you can pretty much bushwhack and go for a long ways if you want to fight a little bit. Not here. It was really brutal. It was hard. And one of the things that was interesting is when I was going down there, I could see that something large was moving logs and had been traversing this particular area. Nothing definitive, nothing really stuck out to me. But as I'm going down there, I'm yelling back up to him, to have him guide me to where I was at. And all of a sudden I get down there and it was all of a sudden clear. And everything had been pushed away. It was this open area. And I started yelling up to him, is this it? And they said, yeah. And what the subject did is, for the 55 minutes, it would move from one point to another and back and forth. The whole time it was down there. And they were observing, sorry if my voice is shaking, but it was going back and forth. And so what I ended up finding down there is all the debris had been pushed away. It was down to the bare earth, and there was a mound on one side and a mound on the other. And so I went and stood on the mound, and I asked, was this one of the locations that I was standing? They said yes, and I went over to the other mound, and I stood on that one. Well, the interesting thing about those two mounds is I could see this trail where people would frequent perfectly. But the only way they could see where I was standing is if through the thermal they could see my heat signature. And they determined by the size and by my relative size and just their memory recollection that it was probably at least, we figured in the range of probably 8 feet, 8.5, and about, if you were to triple my mass, is about how big the subject was. Well, as I'm looking down there, I actually find the track line of where the subject came up. It had so the ball of your print, it had a 7.5 inch wide ball. It was in the duff and the pine needle, so I couldn't cast it. And the stride from hill to toe was 5.5 feet. And the subject had come up. I was on a time crunch at that particular time because I was supposed to teach some rudimentary tracking and some casting classes. And so we went back to the local California guys and told them of this area. So I don't know what they did after the fact. I didn't follow up. I told them, if you guys get a trail cam there, whatever it is, it frequents this area all the time. It's very well used. It's a path that comes in there, and it's something that you guys need to be aware of. Well, the interesting thing is we had made friends with a couple guys from the Midwest who were sheriffs, and they were about 6'5", both of them, and they were really tall individuals. And one of the things I learned on expeditions is that you don't tell a lot of people what you're doing, because then you can have more controlled situations, and you don't have things that kind of get tainted, so to speak. So we told these two guys we'd become friends with. So what they wanted to do is they wanted to go out early one morning, because most of our stuff took place at night. We'd go out at night and things like that. So they went out early in the morning. They'd actually set up a camera on the beginning of the trailhead, and they leave. And I can't remember how long after they leave, you see a subject peek out, see the camera, and peek back in. And I actually just found that video just recently on my computer. But yeah, it's about, they're 6'5", and by the tree, if you look at the trees and stuff, their heads would have came up to here on the subject. But it just peeked out like this, saw the camera and went back. So that was interesting too. And there's a lot of these areas that have this type of situation. So this next story it's big for related, but it's just kind of funny, so I just want to tell it. So on the 2009 expedition, we were going to go to the Wyoming one shortly after. So the BFRO left me a lot of their thermal equipment. Well, one of the thermal pieces is a vehicle-mounted, we used to call it the R2 unit, because it's a big dome, and it magnetized to the top of my Ford, and we magnetized it. The operator would be inside the vehicle, and you could use the thermal imager, and I'll tell you right now, it was sweet. It was a sweet setup. We also had 3rd gen night vision and a couple handheld thermals, and my task was to be the courier pigeon and take them up to the Wyoming expedition. So anyway, I have family. They've never looked through thermals at the time. And so we took them up to Farmington Flats by Francis Peak, where the domes are. If you live on the Wasatch Front, there's some radar domes up there. So we took them up to Farmington Flats, and we're sitting there and looking around, and we see a couple people trying to find parties up there, and we're watching through the thermals. And all of a sudden I see these lights coming, and I'm going, wait a minute, why are they coming that way? That's like the worst possible way to come into this where we're sitting. As they're getting closer, I see that's a Davis County Sheriff. I'm going, okay, this is going to be fun. And so the Davis County Sheriff pulls up, and the passenger, there's two of them, the passenger rolls his window and I goes, where does this road lead? I'm going, this has to be a trick question. If you're driving in the middle of the night and you're up on this road, okay, what's going on here? It's like, it leads back to Bountiful Campground. You can drive out that way. I'm thinking, why don't you know where you're at? And so they ask us, and they see the R2 unit on there. And incidentally, that son right there was younger, and he was actually following the sheriffs with the R2 unit, and it makes a loud humming noise and whirs and everything as it's moving. And so, me being the kind of smarty pants I was, he goes, so what are you guys doing up here? I said, looking for Bigfoot. Both doors on the vehicle open up, and both get out and go, no, seriously, what are you doing? No, looking for Bigfoot. And it's like, I happened to be in the Deseret News on the front page for that expedition. So I had a copy of the Deseret News, and so I had to hand it to the sheriffs to show them that I'm really looking for Bigfoot. And so after they saw that, they go, okay, they believe us. And so we had a fun time with the sheriff, showing the thermals, but the whole entire time as the sheriffs are walking around, my son's following them with the thermal, going, Jake, knock it off. But so that was fun, but I thought what was interesting is their parting comment, or one of the last things they said to it, if you're from the local area, you kind of get the gist. They go, so do you believe it's Cain? I thought, I don't know. And so that was interesting. It was just a funny story that occurred. And another story, I don't know how long, but another story was last year, my friend who's the investigator was up in the high Uintas and actually found a bunch of tracks. And he came back and told me, so we hiked back in there and to check him out. He said that more than likely he thinks there were Bigfoot tracks. And so we get up there. The tracks were about the size of my footprint, but there was hundreds of them around this small lake. And whatever it was, the subject had actually built little structures and things like that. And I wasn't 100% sure because there were some that looked like it had a mid-tarsal break where in the mud it would squish the mud. We ended up making several casts, which I don't know why, but I forgot to bring them. There are pictures of them on Utah Squatching Group on Instagram. I forgot to bring them, but we ended up doing it. But the whole time I wasn't sold until we found the track line to where the subject had come in from the timber. And this particular area is very well known for Bigfoot activity. In fact, a lot of weird Bigfoot activity. And but the subject had come in. The irony is I went off we learned, there was a lot of lessons learned. So we had made out a cast, we ran out of cast material, and we were on the side of the lake that my friend had said that's where they found him. Well, we ended up finding better prints on the other side of the lake as we're walking out. In fact, one was a knuckle print and a hand print where it had gotten down into the dirt, and there were several of them. So never run out of cast material until you're done with the whole thing and you find and you do more investigation. But the hill to toe stride on this subject was 30 inches, which is an average, that's my height average. And so it wasn't until we found where the subject had come in from the deep timber. And if you know the area, there's nobody's going to run around in that area. And plus, I've shown some people, and there it really is, and looks like a mid-tarsal break is in the foot. But that was pretty cool. Another thing, a more recent story is we had family and friends that went up to an area in the Uintas. It's private land. But my youngest son, as we were out, I don't know, it was about 1 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. About 1 o'clock in the morning, we've been seeing a lot of elk and deer and different things. So we had a really good frame of reference, which was really nice. But he ended up seeing one through a thermal imager that night. So if you want to hear his story, you can hunt him down. He's right there. What I do now is we just go out and family with friends. We usually do about 3 or 4 trips a year and do this stuff, and we have a lot of fun doing it. Most of all, people have asked me, why I do it, and I really don't care if people know that I do it. But one of the sidebar things that has come from this journey is I have become extremely close to my children. You get really close to children and your family when you're out there at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning doing this, and you have a lot of time to talk. And now we also have tons of stories because until they find an actual subject, the pictures you see and those different things are mostly for the people because they really don't prove a whole lot of evidence. But there is more circumstantial evidence concerning Squatch than most people go to death row for. There is a lot of information out there, and Jeff Meldrum, for those who may not know the subject, he's a professor out of Idaho State University. He's probably the premier person on Squatch and the footprint. And he's said some interesting things. One is their foot is actually designed not to leave prints. Because I have found several times that I know we've had activity inside our camp, and I have only found drag marks because they go from all fours to walking. It's nothing to them because there was 4 individuals in Sierra Nevadas that they all had cameras, and I'm guilty of this too, that I've been in situations where if I would have thought about it, but they all had cameras and they saw a subject run across the scree slope, and the subject was going from 2 to 4 like it was nothing. And it really didn't change in the clip and the speed. I know a guy from Louisiana in the Washington expedition. He thought he was watching a wolf come up or a coyote come up with a thermal until it stood up behind a tree and looked around the tree at him. Another interesting thing is, I was like, when I first got into this, I was really naive about the topic, and I'm still not an expert. But what was kind of shocked me was all the photographs that I saw on the Washington expedition. That they had so many photographs. In fact, 2 people on that expedition ended up getting photographs. One of the photographs was 226 yards away, and we had my 510 frame go out there, and we estimate that it was at least another half of him high. Oh, and by the way, the one in California, it was 86 yards away, because we take the laser rangefinders and things like that. It was 86 yards away. And one of the things we do a lot in a particular area is we do a lot of test things to kind of get an idea. And this is one of the things that the trackers taught us to do. They said one of the things, when you think you hear something in the mountains, more than likely it's about twice as close. And so what we'll do is we'll go to certain areas and we'll break sticks and things like that, because that's one of the common occurrences. We'll break sticks to see at a certain distance when you start hearing them. And so when I was down in California where that subject had gone back between the two mountains, it wasn't until I got to a 2.5-inch diameter stick before they heard me. And they were hearing stick breaks down there. So it kind of gives you an idea of sometimes when you think you hear a stick break in the mountains, that it's probably a lot larger stick. It's not just something being stepped on. Another thing too is four-legged animals like ungulates and stuff like that, their foot is actually designed really well not to break sticks and to sneak through the forest, because probably the dumb ones that make noise probably get eaten by predators. So they're really designed not to do that. So when they do things like that, when they break sticks, we found it's deliberate. There's actually one situation where I actually think I found a stick that was broken. A friend of mine who's a squatcher, he was up in Farmington, above, I don't know if you guys know the lagoon, but Farmington Canyon is known for a lot of activity, and they've actually snuck down into the dumpsters by a lagoon and ate the dumpsters. So there's a lot of people who have seen him doing that. But anyway, this was up on top of Farmington. He was sleeping. It was a opening day of muzzleloader, and he heard some noise come into camp. And one of the things he heard was a stick break, and he was very precise on where he had heard things from. So he took me up there about 3 or 4 days later. He showed me the loaf of bread that the subject had stole. I actually still have the plastic that it had bitten into and ripped it out. You can see the incisor on the plastic, and it had taken the bread out and ate half the loaf. But he said the stick break came from a certain spot, and I actually found a fresh break of a tree about that big around, and I took it. And it's one of the few things that I think probably was actually done by a squatch. My last story before we go to Q&A, a few years ago, behind Ben Lomond Peak, there was an individual that contacted us and had an encounter behind Ben Lomond Peak. And I can't remember if it's North Fork campground area. Anyway, so he was with his children and a friend, and he took one of his children back in camp. He came back in camp, and there was a subject, excuse me, that was just outside, just beyond the picnic table where his two kids were. And the way he was talking and describing everything, I thought to myself, I said, he's either a first responder, or he's former military, or he is currently military, because the way he was doing things, and he said he drew his pistol, had a tack line on it, and he put it right on the subject's forehead, and the subject just kind of casually walked away, and he showed us where it walked away. And so his kids were so freaked out, he just packed up everything and just left. Well, the following morning he goes back to get his camp. Well, let me rephrase that. He didn't pack up everything; they just left, because the following morning he went back to get the rest of his gear, and he hears commotion in a nearby pond. He's going, who on earth is swimming and doing things this early in the morning? Because the sun hadn't even come up. And so he goes back there, and as you're going, there's a berm that you have to go up before you can see into the pond area. Well, as he's going down this berm, this dip before he goes up to the berm, he hears a lot of splashing, a lot of commotion. And then he gets up there, and he sees one. We ended up guessing it was about 56 to 60 yards away. And he was standing there. He says it was just a massive individual covered with hair, standing there just staring at him. And all of a sudden it just turns around, jumps up onto the ledge, which we had measuring was 8 feet. So he was submerged in water up to his waist. He jumped 8 feet above bank, up on the bank, and just left, casually walked off. So my friend and I, we went around. My friend was going to check the pond region, and I was going to go up where he believed the subject went. So I went and started doing a spiral search up there, and this was 30 days after the the siding, and in that particular, not like now, we had tons of rain. So there was a lot of rain. So I didn't really expect to find a whole lot of anything. So we went up there, and I was asking the individual questions about his background, but he was being really tight-lipped. And so I kind of guessed on where I thought the subject had left. But anyway, long story short, as I found his track line up the mountainside, it was about a 5 to 6 foot track line, and his toes, his imprints of his toes were about 7 inches across. And it went up the track line, and then that's when he finally opened up to me, and told me what he did. But he was a JTAC, and he knew his stuff, and he was very precise on his descriptions, knew his details, and knew everything. And that's when he finally opened up to me, because he wasn't sure how legit we were until I found the track line. Unfortunately, I couldn't cast them because of how old they were, and the toes were dug into the mountainside. But it's when I started showing them they had went up through this area. And a lot of times when they go through areas, as a human, you're going, I wouldn't do that, but they don't care. From what I found, they'll go wherever they want. And that's usually when you find them, is they'll go in the trap that you hate. Anyway, open it. Is that long enough? You want me to go longer? Let's do a few Q&As, and that might spark some more stories. But they wanted me to open up for Q&A, so does anybody have any questions? What's that? So mid-tarsal break, if you get Jeff Milgram's book, so let me put this paper away so I'm not floating with it. Your foot can't bend, so if my foot was flat on the ground like this, your foot can't bend like this, like the hand can. Theirs can. So what they'll do is when they're walking, one of the things they do is they don't have a toe kick off like you do, and they don't have a heel hit like you do. They'll hit flat and lift flat. But what a mid-tarsal break allows them to do is it allows them to clamp things and grab things like this. In fact, a perfect example is on the 2007 expedition, because there's been a lot of sightings of them in trees and things like that. In the 2007 expedition, a group of people with thermals were in a gorge, and they were walking with thermals, and they heard something that sounded like it was parallel on them. Well, they were new. They were paid customers on this particular expedition, and they pivoted, and they saw a subject that was probably not even 30 feet, 40 feet from on the side. What the subject did is it dropped down like a crouch behind the tree and jumped and scurried up the tree. They said it looked like it reminded them of someone that went after coconuts. The feet clamped around the bottom of the base of the tree like your hands would, and its top of its hands went up, and it went right up in the tree into a really congested area of the pine tree. And they didn't see it, but it freaked them out so bad that as soon as my friend got down there, one of the investigators, he wasn't an investigator at the time, but as soon as my friend got down there and started questioning, he said, did you guys keep an eye on it? So what they think happened is, after they freaked out and lost contact with it, it dropped down and left. But so the mid-tarsal break just allows their foot to bend like this. And so on the tracks I cast, you can see where the toes, and because it was muddy, you can see where the subject clamped the mud with its foot. You can't do that. Because when you hit like this, and then when you push off, so a really good way to do it is if you just kind of see it like a sand area, just walk casually across it, and you'll see, if you just do it normally, your heel will hit, and your toe will push sand. So you'll have a toe push up. But if you get Jeff Milgram's book or just go online, there's plenty of pictures, but it hits like this and this. So that's why you don't really see heel hits and toe kickoffs unless they're trying to clamp their foot for traction. That's what mid-tarsal break is.
What is that lake in the Highlands?
I was told not to reveal. Sorry. If you search, I'll give you a hint. If you search hard enough, the individual who found the tracks, who told me not to say anything, he did say something. So I'll blame it on him if you find him. He's not here, but if you happen to find that place, it's sure. So YouTube, maybe Instagram. Yeah, maybe Instagram. There are things I have promised I won't tell, and that's one of them. Even though later on after he promised me not to tell, I see where he told like, what? but I'm not going to break my promise, but it doesn't take a whole lot. But it's an area where it has a long history. It goes back to the 70s of having encounters where one laid on a tent with a bunch of kids. In fact, one of the kids ended up falling asleep because he couldn't get out from underneath one. Where there's seasoned hikers who've gone back to this place that hike Washington State, Oregon, Alaska, and they won't go back there. And one of them found a deer leg on their doorstep of their tent when they were back there. There's all kinds of interesting activities that have happened back there, but it's gone clear back to the 70s. This area has a long history of activity. Yeah, you. Yep. Yep.
How come we haven't seen any good pictures? Remember that one guy who was walking? All the experts have said that's nobody said in the picture. Oh, everybody has it. I heard a couple of people say there are pictures.
So his question is, for those who didn't hear, is where are the pictures and stuff? And that was one of my questions too. So I'll go into a couple topics. One is what I learned on the Washington expedition, where actually 2 individuals got pictures that day. They don't share them. It's almost like, well, there's a couple reasons. It's become more pop culture now because of Finding Bigfoot and other shows out there. So more people are a little bit more open about it, but back then they wouldn't. And in all reality, it's a really good topic or it's a really good story for that person, because we call them blob squatches. It's just a blob. Unless you're there and you can actually do the physical investigation or actually find the track line, which we did on the one that was 226 yards away. We found where it went into the woods. Because it came out, it was an old logging road. It came out with one step in the middle of the road, went down 2 steps, and then it was into the trees. And up in the Olympic Peninsula, for those who haven't been there, because I was arrogant when they were talking to me when I wanted to go up there. I said, well, can I go bushwhacking up there? And they said, no, because it was Christine Walls who was talking to me. I thought, nah, no, I could go bushwhacking. Well, my first bushwhacking trip up there, I sunk up to my hip in Duff. I thought, no, I'm going to bust a hip. I ain't doing this. So I stayed on roads and things like that. But so that's one thing. So I don't know, I haven't looked into the technology of trail cams lately, but I know trail cams are getting more advanced. But back when I was doing it, they had to get Reconyx trail cams, and they had to send them back to the factory to improve their wake-up time and their picture time to be really fast. Because what happens, because of the stride of the Squatch, by the time a Squatch walks in front of your trail cam, and your trail cam wakes up and triggers, it's long gone. There's a lot of hip, butt, torso shots, but like I said up in Washington, I actually saw pictures of one carrying a snake, one peeking around a tree with its face. I saw a lot of pictures, and I asked that very question. I said, why aren't they showing this? Because it was a book that you could just look through. They didn't want to. There's a lot of people that just don't want to do it. They don't want to share it. They want to keep it within the group. It also depends on the group, but you would think with all the trail cams and different things that are out there, you get more definitive pictures and things like the Patterson film. And when you do, one of the things that I like to do is I want to find the physical evidence to corroborate the picture, because there's so much technology now. I mean, they've done a lot of investigation on the Patterson film to where the suits, they've had Hollywood people, the suit technology didn't exist back then. Biomechanically, they can't replicate the stride. And what a lot of people don't know is they actually took a tracker up after that film and tracked Patty up the mountainside, and Patty actually sat on her butt about 150 yards off and watched Gimlin and Patterson look at it. Another thing they don't know about, a lot of people don't know about that footage, is they actually found Patty's footprints years and years before, and they found her track line, but after she witnessed them looking at her tracks, they never found her prints again. But so yeah, there's just a lot of people don't share, and I'll be honest with you, if I ever find or have a picture, you probably will never see it. Well, here's the reason why, is because I used to be of the mindset that I wanted to prove it to the world, and now I just enjoy, I thoroughly enjoy doing it with family and friends and the stories, and actually I really love taking skeptics up. Because skeptics do a few things for you. One is they're skeptical, so they'll question everything you're doing. At least I hope they do, and we want them to. We want to, if you don't believe something, tell me. Because it's kind of a refresher course, because you get so ingrained and indoctrinated into it that you get jaded. I mean, there's times I'll go up, I don't set my trail cam up. I'm trying to be better, because my wife goes, why are you buying this stuff if you're not using it? So I try to be better about it, because you just kind of get jaded. And so, but a lot of people just don't want to share things. And so I just do it for mostly family, friends, and things like that now. But skeptics are good, and plus I like to see people wrap their head around things when stuff happens. And I don't try to convince people, I want them to go through the process. There was one person in our group that actually took him a year before he admitted to himself that he saw him. And he's actually seen him twice. In fact, one of the times was on the other side of the truck that I was standing on, but I couldn't bring myself. You think you're going to act a certain way when certain things happen? No.
Tell the whole story.
You want me to tell the whole story? My kids make fun of me. So he's young. I don't remember how old he was. Ethan.
I was 11.
He was 11 years old. I was probably a bad parent. Took my kids out, and there we go. But we were. My friend, one of the guys had just seen one up in this area. It's up by Logan. So we go up there, and for whatever reason, whenever we saw eye shine on this particular subject, we could only see one eye, so we don't know if something happened to his other eye. So anyway, Ethan's in the truck, in my Ford F-150. He's in the passenger side, and I think it was 3 people. It was Christine, Stephen, and I can't remember the third person. It was you? Went walking. They were going to go up and do some howling while I was with Ethan, because Ethan didn't want to go. So they were going to do some call blasting, and we were going to call blast and vocal back and forth. And so they leave. I go to walk around the other side, the back end of my truck, to get on the other side and get in the vehicle with Ethan until they got to their spot. Well, I go back around the back side of the truck, and something bounces to my feet. That's not supposed to happen. And so I go back, grab the walkie-talkie, and I go, you guys turn back and look, because they had my first gen night vision. I said, you guys need to turn back and look over here. I think something's over here. Well, our friend Christina, I'm going to out her. My friend Christina gets on the radio and starts freaking out on the radio, saying, it's moving in the front of your truck, it's moving in the back of your truck. And I'm thinking, is there a cat? I'm going, am I going to be attacked? Because she's just freaking out, and she's getting me worked up. Because I'm looking on the ground now, trying to see if there's a cat or something that's going to come around the truck and get me. And so I'm doing that, and she says, no, it's moving back and forth. No, it's on the other side of your truck. I'm going, what the crap's going on? And so Steven, her boyfriend at the time, grabs it. He's calmer. He said, it's on the other side of your truck. And I thought, okay, I'm not looking up. And I couldn't bring myself to look up. And I thought, I'll never crack under that. Yeah, I couldn't bring myself to look over the truck. But the reason why we know it was a Squatch.
Wait, what'd you say?
Okay, this is what they tease me about. I'm on the walkie-talkie. You guys need to get back here. I said, you guys need to come back, because I'm by myself. I'm with 11 year. They ain't gonna protect me. And I'm going, please. I start going, please come back. Please come back. And it's all recorded. I had an audio recorder right here. It's all recorded. But I'm going, please come back. So every once in a while, when we're out squatching, you hear on the radio, please come back. Yeah, so I'm fine. They can make fun of me all they want. So they did that. But what happened at the very end is it finally dawned on Steven that he had my first gen night vision. So he brought it up to look, and he actually saw the Bigfoot walk off on the other side of my truck and went down and disappeared in the trees. That's how we verified it. Because I was parked on gravel, and the trackers taught us there's 2 things that are the worst things to ever try to track in. One's gravel and one's pine needles. Those are the 2 worst things to track in, because it's just hard to find sign and transfer. Any questions? I get that a lot. So in the community, no, it's a good question.
Repeat what he said.
Okay, he asked me, what do I think Bigfoot is? In the community I was in, because I was when I was with the BFRO, we had chat rooms. And so anything that would happen across the country, we were always chatting about. Because people would ask me too, well, aren't you afraid you're going to get hurt? I said, if anybody across the country ever got hurt, I'd probably be one of the first people to know about it. The prevailing belief amongst that community and is a lost primate or an unknown primate like Gigantopithecus, something like that. Me personally, I don't know. I've had a lot of things. I've had a lot of things occur. I know that I believe they're intelligent. I believe they can communicate because of Scott Nelson, because he's broke down their language in phonics. He's made. I think it's Scott Nelson. Is it Scott Nelson? Yeah, he was a cryptolinguist for over 20 years for the Navy. You could actually Google his name and find it and see his speeches and things. But he was a cryptolinguist for over 20 years, and he took the Sierra sounds and broke them down, and actually says they talk twice as fast as we do, but they definitely have a language, and the defining factor of why they have a language is they speak in negation. In other words, they speak in negative connotation, and they speak in no. And he believes their word for no is no. And so, but me personally, I haven't come to a definitive conclusion. But the prevailing thing is they think it's a monkey. Ochre Mountains? Okay.
He has a neighbor who had activity in the Oak Mountains.
Okay. The question was, is the Ochre Mountains, that's over by Kennecott, right? Yeah, I've hunted over there. And your answer is yes. They have had activity over there. And pretty much they have a lot of places where they actually have some habituation sites and different things like that are actually more rural than you think. Like there's been in Layton, they've come down. There's places in Oklahoma where they come down in subdivisions and things like that, especially if you're out. But yeah, they have activity. Pretty much anywhere. I haven't heard of a lot of activity in southern Utah. There's pockets, but pretty much northern Utah, Uintas, Wasatch Front, when they become more casual. Because we've had them come into camp several times. We've had a lot of indicators and things like that to where that occurs.
Talk about the tracker who was anti-tracker.
Am I good? All right. I'm done.
Appreciate you and your family. We're going to have to get you here for some more, I can tell already. It's good stories. By the way, whether they agree with it or not, a lot of BSing after these things. That's some of the funnest times. So remember their faces, and if you've got questions on that, go talk to them. Obviously, any of these speakers, we could go a day or two with Q&A and that kind of thing. So hate to shut you down, John, but we got to move on. So, but sure appreciate you. Some good stories.